Okay, welcome back everyone to the Public Service Commission meeting and the agenda. And the next thing on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public that wishes to make any comment to the Public Service Commission? I see a couple people moving around, but no one's getting up, so I guess there's no public comment. Mr. Howard, I guess it's time for Director's comments.
Chairman Winslow, Commissioners, I thank you very much. First, I guess on my agenda would be to welcome our new commissioners. I've already welcomed Commissioner Correa, and I will certainly welcome Commissioner Drexler. Looking forward to working with you. As a little bit of an aside, I'll be happy to explain our new 2015 no travel policy, which I did at one of our previous meetings that you probably weren't in attendance at. Basically says we have no money, and so travel is somewhat limited in 2015, and I'll be happy to explain that to you as soon as we fully understand what OMB is trying to tell us with respect to the budget. So again, welcome to the PSC. It's a shame you're not going to be able to travel very much this year, but we'll see how that all plays out anyhow. Would also like to bring you up to speed on a PJM regional issue. PJM has been working to identify a transmission project that resolves reliability and stability issues that occur under certain circumstances with the Salem and Hope Creek plants, nuclear plants in New Jersey, otherwise known as Artificial Island. They've been working at this for over 2 years now, and they finally come up with a solution. PSC staff, and in particular, Mr. Farber and some others, have been following the PJM process for some time, and in particular, the potential implications to Delaware ratepayers. If the Commission would like, Mr. Farber would love the opportunity to brief you on the status of the process and to recommend some potential comments to PJM with respect to the Artificial Island issue. And I would thank you for your consideration of Mr. Farber's potential comments and issues.
I don't think they're potential. I think they're going to be actual, right, Mr. Farber?
We hope so, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Howitt. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good afternoon. This item is to seek approval of staff's recommendation to send comments to PJM regarding the Artificial Island proposal. And I guess Commissioner Gray, if asked, you could say the second book you read was Delaware's comments to PJM regarding Artificial Island. And I apologize for all the complexity in there, but these issues involve PJM planning and cost allocation and FERC, and there's no real easy way to go about those. In addition, this letter was constructed for potential future use if necessary. So it's a little longer than we'd ordinarily want to deal with. But as Mr. Howitt suggested, the Artificial Island is a network of facilities to deliver energy from the 3 nuclear power plants located in New Jersey, the Artificial Island. And PJM identified operational difficulties with those 3 power plants and potential violations of their various requirements. And in approximately May of 2013, they opened up a proposal window where they sought from proposers a project that would alleviate those operational difficulties. This proposal window, this process has taken 2 years up to now. Initially, there were 26 different projects that were identified. They were all narrowed down, and the last meeting in April, PJM identified LS Power's 5A as the project to alleviate those concerns. There were a variety of reasons that PJM came to that conclusion. Some of the major ones were the cost cap that LS Power offered was much more encompassing than others that they saw. Additionally, there was more flexibility in LS Power's proposal to achieve the permits necessary, and the use of the horizontal drilling techniques was sought to also address the permitting concerns. So on balance, PJM recommended the LS Power project to alleviate those issues with Artificial Island. The LS Power project is a 230 kV facility from Artificial Island to Lower Delaware, rather than using existing lines that are in Artificial Island to Northern Delaware. And because of the way that the FERC has approved cost allocation, and I can go into details if you want, but what PJM has presented, the cost responsibility for this LS Power project, 100% of the costs would be assigned to Delmarva. And that could be very significant. And so PJM at the last meeting requested comments, which are due no later than May 29th. If available sooner, I would suggest that we file them sooner. And basically what we're suggesting that PJM consider is that in specific circumstances, their present manuals do not provide for identification of the beneficiaries of the facilities that are being constructed. As identified in the letter, the issues are in New Jersey, and yet all the costs are being assigned to Delaware. And as we described in the letter, that could be a significant cost impact of upwards of 25%. So as we describe in the comments, PJM should take, in these specific circumstances, additional studies in order to identify beneficiaries of the new facilities. The specific circumstances we're pointing to as a basis for PJM to more or less amplify their current procedures would be this. In this instance, you have an entirely new facility which involves an entirely new right-of-way. So it's not being put into the middle of existing facilities where normal analyses of PJM would be able to identify the users of those facilities that alleviated that was a solution to the problem they were pursuing. In addition to being new facilities, what we're pointing out is that the cost of these new facilities is being assigned either all or in part to a transmission zone that did not contribute to the issues that the facility is a solution for. So additionally, the last thing we would point to is there's a significant cost impact as a result of PJM's proposed cost allocation. So we're trying to present to PJM a methodology that they could use that would assist in identifying the beneficiaries without having to hopefully go through a lot of regulatory procedures. We're hoping to avoid regulatory procedures, and hopefully if we can get PJM into discussions, we can alleviate our concerns without having to use formal regulatory procedures in the future. That's a summary level, and I'd be happy to take questions on the letter.
For the commissioners, could you explain exactly, for example, so everyone knows, we don't have jurisdiction over the municipalities in Delaware, nor do we have the Delaware Electric Co-op people. So we don't have a jurisdiction over them. This allocation of cost to Delaware, does it cover all Delaware? And then what are you doing to see, if it does cover all Delaware, what are you doing to see if we can sort of gather a stronger army, so to speak, to go to PJM on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, the cost assignment is to the transmission owner, which is Delmarva. Delmarva would incorporate these costs into its development of the network rate for transmission service that customers not only of ODEC but the municipals would have to pay, as well as Delmarva Maryland customers. So The zone is the Delmarva zone, and it covers those entities as well as ratepayers in Delaware of Delmarva.
And what are you doing to try to incorporate them into your efforts to convince PJM not to allocate the costs in the manner you anticipate?
Once we receive hopeful approval of these comments, then I think the first thing we'll do, I would suggest Mr. Howard do, is provide copies to potential allies so that we can get more of a united voice with PJM on this issue.
And Ms. Scott and Mr. McGonigal are still in the room, I know. And so I think this is something perhaps that they'll be able to take back as information from this meeting as well.
I'd be happy to provide copies to Ms. Scott as well.
The Commissioner, have any questions of Mr. Farber?
Just one clarifying question. It seems like, if I interpret this at a high level, that the benefit you indicate is going to accrue to New Jersey. Can you elaborate to describe what that means?
Commissioner Gray, I wish I could. We've asked PJM to identify the benefits that accrue to the operation of these units in New Jersey as a result of these new facilities. The response that we've gotten is that there are manuals that have certain requirements, and these new facilities will allow PJM to meet those requirements. But as I mentioned in the comments, PJM has not identified how much better those units will operate, what types of additional output those units would be able to achieve. And so my sense is that those benefits are there, and I wish I could point them out for you. That's one of the things we're relying on PJM to provide us as part of our hoped-for discussions with them. But I think those benefits are there.
So in principle, if I understand, we're asking PJM to do a little more study on the cost-benefit as is and as planned analysis.
Mr. Gray, that's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
It might be good for you to give us a little education on what NERC is and why it is that there were problems at Artificial Island.
Well, NERC is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They establish standards by which utilities, RTOs, have to perform. Again, the specific violations have not been identified by PJM. There's evidently some reactive issues that they identified in their request for proposals. But in terms of details as to what, when, where, and how those violations were occurring, and as a result of what type of operations they were occurring, I think that's a need for further discussion with PJM.
Well, I'm 1,000% in favor of sending a letter, and it just seems to me that the problem's all initiated in New Jersey, and it's my logic how we have to pay 100% to fix their problem. And so I think we need to engage them in a discussion of the issue and try to convince them that they need to do further work in order to accurately reflect who's got to pay for what. So I support it. And if there are any other comments from the commissioners.
I have a question.
Mr. Geddes?
So, Artificial Island, 3 units, 2 Salems, 1 Hope Creek, right?
That's correct.
That's like 3,000 megawatts?
Roughly, yes.
So
Over 3,000.
How much is getting transported across the bay?
That's part of the runs we haven't seen. And what is transported across the bay without the LS Power project as well as after the LS Power project, we don't know. All we know is that with the LS Power project, the utilization of that facility is 100% Delmarva. And so that is what PJM is relying on as the basis for the cost allocation.
So what happens to the other transmission line that goes across higher up on the bay? It still transmits power to other facilities in Delaware?
That would be my expectation.
So we have 2 towers, or actually we'll have 5 or 6 towers we can hit instead of 2 with a ship.
Well, not necessarily. Ellis Power is proposing as a horizontal directional drilling, which would go under the bottom. So that flexibility,
That won't be cheap.
well, there's that flexibility to achieve permitting. That is one of the issues that PJM identified.
Yeah, it's a shame
Tom
Denrick
probably
already
describes
left.
this better, but what happens is at 500K and above, it gets socialized, as you know. This is 240,
238.
230. So then it gets, so we end up under the formula, because it's under the 500, we end up getting, according to the DFAC, we end up paying 100%.
Right. There's a two-stage process for the cost allocation as a result of FERC's order, as a result of Order 1000. The first is, and the transmission owners filed this, and that's what was approved, is based on the voltage. So in the east part of PJM, facilities with a voltage of 500 kV or above are subject to a 50-50 allocation. Used to be 100% socialization, but that was revised so that 50% of the cost of such high voltage facilities is socialized, still remains socialized. The other 50% is subject to a DFACS, which is distribution of factors, which is based on utilization of facilities. The lower voltage facilities, such as this one, a 230 kV, are 100% DFACS. So it's the cost allocation is entirely based on the utilization of the facility rather than the benefits that may spread beyond its utilization. So that's why we're looking at this 100% cost allocation.
Interesting. They've been trying to do this in the Chesapeake Bay for a while, but they haven't been able, Maryland has not allowed them to dig under the bay. I didn't realize that this was going to be a subterranean.
The submarine.
Submarine.
I think maybe when I'm not sure if it was a map line or if it's a trail line, which one was going to go under the bay, but I think actually the PJM cut that project off before they actually rejected the underground.
But
It's
this,
a process of litigation, I believe, but
there were a lot of environmentalists who were
Right.
completely,
Flanders.
exercised about the fact that they were going to try to do this. But they're going. I mean, how long a line under the bay? Because obviously the bay goes like this at the bottom of the bay, so it's going to be a much longer line down there.
It's coming in south, but what is it, between Red Lion and
Oh, so not that much.
Yeah,
something,
it's the south.
something creek?
Yeah. Okay, so it's still north
right.
of where the bay really.
Why?
It's not, I think it's about 30-some miles. It's 3 miles into the river.
So Mr. Chair, I have a question. With respect to the requested report or additional analysis, do you anticipate, since it's coming from the Delaware PSC, that we will be billed for such scope of work?
No.
Okay.
That's part of what PJM it basically is required to do in order to complete its studies. If it decides to do them, it would just be PJM.
I have one, and then I'll be quiet. But the case that went up to I think it went to the Supreme Court because C.J. Seitz argued it on the riparian rights with regard to the LNG facility that New Jersey wanted to put on their side of the river, but wouldn't share the cost with us. That decision upheld a 1787 whatever of where the Delaware state line is in the Delaware Bay, and it's right on the New Jersey shore.
Right.
So if we allegedly own the riparian rights, does Delaware as a state have any ability to,
Well,
separate and apart?
That'll be Denrick.
Well, my question is, do we have the right peculiar to us because of where the boundaries of the state are with regard to the bay to intervene and otherwise say, no, you're not going to put a line down through the middle of our state? Or across our
Let me.
Well, I think that our commission has approved the line, haven't we? Or not?
We approved the process
We did.
by which
Remember that
the developer.
Because I brought it up, that one way is to not approve it, but there was problems with that too, so.
Well,
Anyway, we say we approved the procedure.
Essentially.
Before we knew that all the costs.
Well, but I think in the context of a transmission facility that had to be built, I think, as we said in the letter, this proposal was the best that I think of PJM's alternatives. It had the cost cap as well as the other facilities. Additionally, it appears from an engineering sense, and I'm not an engineer, but that having this additional southern line provided additional benefits to Delaware as a result of its construction.
I have received an email from Ruth Ann, who was at the PJM annual meeting, and it was Bob, you, and John have both been copied on this as well regarding this. Just had a quick conversation with Steve Hurling, who stated that the defects was completed and that we likely would not like the results. Hurling wouldn't say when it will be released, but I'm bummed.
Okay, who wants to make the motion on the letter? We gotta get it out
Before
this
you make the
afternoon.
motion, if I could just add then, based on that. The comments are due on the 26th, however, I think on or before the 26th. If we get approval, perhaps we should provide them to BGM earlier, so if there is a potential for discussion, that we'd have that opportunity before the 26th.
I guess what
29th.
I'm saying this afternoon would be good.
But I would also caution that I think it would be appropriate to approach ODEC or Delaware Electric Cooperative and DMEC to see if they want to sign on as well. And that shouldn't delay us much more than maybe a couple days. But I think they would have similar concerns that we would have with the cost allocation.
Well, as I mentioned, I think John's been in touch with at least ODEC. I'm not sure about Old Dominion, who also might be involved. But I mean, I think it would obviously be better to have a stronger front than just one entity. The more entities we have, the better off we'll be. So I have no problem with that at all.
Okay, we can revise the letter accordingly if they agree, or they could file their own letter in support of our comments if that's the way they would prefer.
Obviously, data as of today's date, I assume.
Yes.
Based upon
The 29th was the due date, so we can revise that.
Does anybody have any motion with respect to staff's request to send a letter to PJM in opposition to the cost allocation for the LS Powers 230 line?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this issue? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Is there any abstention? The motion passes unanimously. With thanks from the commission to Mr. Farber and staff.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Chairman Winslow. Commissioners, I did want to point out to you that if you're really sincerely interested in what the problem is that's being resolved at Artificial Island, there is an RFP that was put out back in April of 2013, probably about this thick with lots of technical jargon, all about the wonderful problems they have with reactive and all kinds of issues around it. Be happy to give you another book so that you could sit in your spare time and read all about those problems that are there at Artificial Island. So if you'd like that, why, just let me know and we'll get you a hard copy of it.
Thank you so much.
Finally summarize that into one-page executive summary and send it to us.
We do have Sharon Segner here, who's representing LS Power in our audience, and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize her. But I also, as John pointed out in his letter, wanted everybody to understand that we believe that this is probably a very good technical solution and provides additional reliability support in the mid part of Delaware, which we think is a good thing. We just don't want to pay for all of that. We don't mind paying for our fair share, but we just don't want to pay for all of it.
I saw her back there giving hints to the witness, and I would say that I don't think LS Power cares who pays it as long as they get paid. We want it to be fair and fair to the Delaware consumers. You understand that, Sharon. You'll take that back, and I think it's you understand.
The only other thing I'd like to report to you, Commissioners, is Mr. Jason Smith is once again going to be holding a bill transparency workshop on our next Tuesday, June 2nd. It's the same day as we have our commission meeting, but it'll be at 9:30 in the morning. It's a workshop with Delmarva. Now that Delmarva has Solution 1 well underway, there'll be an opportunity for the working group to take a look at making further enhancements with respect to Delmarva's bill transparency issue. Next commission meeting is on Tuesday, June the 2nd, starting at 1 o'clock. I think other than some training for a couple of new commissioners after this meeting, I think that's about all I have for you, sir.
Is there, anybody else have any comments for the good of the commission? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.